Hey guys, I'm here back for day 4. I'm just going to start with a plane today. I'm going to create a closest approximation of a Cinnabon. I've got my reference right here in PureF, which is a free program, which is great for just quickly creating a bulletin board for creating reference. So I'm going to go in rendered view. I'm eventually going to change some settings in the renders so I can get displacement. So I'm going to change the cycles, but right now I'm just going to create height, textures and stuff that I can just create the shape from. And yeah, so let's change the layout here a bit. So go to shader view and add a new material. First thing I'm going to do is get that overall shape. Notice these are pressed together, so it's like a sphere but flat on the sides. So the closest way to create that that I can think of is with the gradient, and if I that a little further out of the way. So yeah, so if they multiply, they're going to be in this, well, we want to change this to multiply. It's a different mixing mode. So they're combining, but these gradients need to be modified so that the dark parts is on the edge. So I think this goes to 0.5. It'll be on the edge. And then I'll use an identical color. So with this, we're going to create a UV texture, and then I'm going to use a gradient, and then radial, and which creates a center from 0, 0, but 0, 0 is in the corner right here, so we can't see it, which is why we need to add a vector math node. I'm going to subtract by 0.5. There are only 2 coordinates in a UV coordinate because it's flat. It's just for the surface, mapping of the surface. These are all different types of mapping. And then we're just going to go ahead and mirror this. So this is in the texture, so this determines the position, everything that's purple. But I'm going to flip the texture. So to do that, I'm going to do the same thing I did up here, except it's instead of being linear, it's now radial. So same thing, subtract 0.5, and then I'm going to use the absolute value. So now we have that on both sides, and that's going to be nice for that inner edge, because we're going to add some more distortion to it. And we do that with if you go to vector and then vector rotate right here, and it's gonna, if you look at from a top view, y goes this way, x goes this way, and z is around, so it's rotating around the z-axis. And if I put that there, and we can, I believe, plug this gradient into it, so this will modify how much it's rotating. So I'm actually going to shift all this out so it's easier to, so it doesn't look reach back, which can make it difficult to read. So yeah, so this output, which looks like this, into the angle, let's see if that's doing what I want. Yeah, so that's starting to do that distortion. And then we can multiply that to increase the amount that it winds around, just like this. And yeah, it's doing a little bit more in the center, and that has to do with the gradient. So what we can do to adjust that is use a color ramp, and that just modifies the curvature. I don't think I'm going to get a perfect adjustment with the time I have, but I think that's looking pretty good, pretty realistic. And then, yeah, and so when we combine these two, so because we have the height from the smooth minimum, and so we can organize this, so we can put all this in a frame, and so if I press G to move this, and then put it in there, and then just rename this overall height, just the name that comes to mind for that. And this also belongs in there. And this will be the spiral. You can then shift this in there. Yeah. And so we want this to be on top of that, and so that transformation is going to be adding. So if we use another mixed color RGB, and then so it's on the add menu color mix RGB, and then yeah, so we're going to use add, plug that in, and then so there we have it on top. And let's take a look at this finally with where the how it looks with the displacement, because we're going to start adjusting that. So if I switch this to cycles, we need to also change in the settings to displacement, and we have to add a displacement node. So that's Shift A vector displacement, and then plug this into the height, and then change mid-level to 0 so it all emits from that first plane. And then finally we're going to subdivide this. So that it has geometry to work with. Right here it's getting, I think that's from the spiral. It's adding to that edge. Maybe we can see with this better what the geometry is. But we're actually just going to mask that part out. To do that, we can just use greater than node, and then another mix, and then multiply, and then plug that in there, and use the height right here, put that to a value close to 0 but not equal to 0, so it looks like that. If we multiply this, there's nothing in there. Notice that just gets rid of that last part of the height. But yeah, if you look at this, it's like a thicker piece of dough that's wrapped around repeatedly. So what we can do is just shift this up, so we can group those. I'm just going to bring this little reroute node in there. I just get by with shift and drag. It's good for organization. It's pretty difficult to get like a well organized thing with the nodes, but frames and those reroute nodes kind of help. Yeah, and then I'm going to add, yeah, I'm going to add. So if we shift that up, and let's try multiplying first, so multiply add, I think it does both, so I don't need to use two nodes at the same time. I haven't used that before, so this is kind of new. Okay, let's take a look at what this looks like right before that. So right now I'm just doing a little bit of debugging, just looking at each of these. So Control-Shift-Click, that's the key I use the most out of Node Wrangler, because it just allows me to quickly see what's going on. So there's that. Yeah. So in the United States, it's kind of a big day. Still waiting on the election results. Try not to follow it too closely, because I think we won't really know until the end of the week. Just hope everybody's practicing self-care and keeping safe. Okay, here I'm gonna plug the smooth minimum into here, and I'm gonna make that a little bit smaller so that we can have some of that slope without the cinnamon. And then gonna use RGB curve and just adjust that curve. So let's make that a little bigger. Just try to flatten that top. Yeah, so I think that's looking pretty good. Yeah, and yeah, so let's start adding the materials. So we're gonna have some bread texture and some frosting to speckle onto it. I'm gonna use, so if we just preview this, we won't see anything because we need some lights in there, because the other material is emissive. And notice like this, it shows as a plane when it cuts because that's all that's there. And so this only exists in cycles, right? So if I go back, it's just a plane. Yeah. So, yeah, and yeah, so we click that so I can see the shading. So this is looking pretty sharp, too sharp, yeah. It's not what we want. So I'm going to use another curve, adjust this. So I'm pretty happy with that curve. I think there's a little bit that goes up here. Maybe I'll try to... Yeah, that's pretty good. And then so here we have the spread. Let's start with getting the base color, and that's going to be based on the two materials we have here, because we know there's this fade, and then kind of lessen the crevices. So wonder if we could just use this gradient to control the inner part. Try that. I only really want this to affect up there, because this I don't want on the edge. Right? We'll see how it looks and then see if we need to fix that. So gonna multiply that. It's the color ramp. It's a quick way to add color. So here, can add on the edge. let's try flipping that. I think I will actually use the double-sided one that we made, just for the smooth edge, even though it's in the middle of this, instead of the tip. So change that to ease to smooth it out. Yeah, so that's looking pretty. And we can just Control-C over that without even going into it. You can just copy and paste. Wish more programs had that. And then just turn that down. And let's actually add some noise to this. So if I look at this, the mapping's all stretched here because it still thinks it's a plane, so it's only mapped to that. So we can use something that's independent of it, which is the position. So if I move this around, it's not based on geometry, it's about the object position. So we can use that to get texture all around. So I'm going to turn up the roughness and put it up into here. So if I combine this, maybe in this case we'll put this through at the end. So we're starting to get that softness. Just play around with that a little bit, try things out. I think we could also use another noise texture to lighten some of the sections. So if I use this, so let's turn these detail all the way down. Or let's try a linear light. Yeah. So that's more what I want. And yeah, so that's good. That's not doing anything. I think I'm gonna change the cardinal. I think that'll, interesting. How about B-spline? Sometimes the curves give a more natural interpolation, but it really depends on the effect that you want. So it's helpful to just try stuff out. So that looks pretty good. And then I think I'm gonna multiply this by the this height right here. So let's just use this. If I look at this, it's gonna be darker at the bottom, but we want it to be darker at the top. So I'm gonna flip this and turn the factor all the way up, so if something's here, it will affect it. It's not an expected effect. It shouldn't be lightening it. Let's try flipping this again. Add. Okay, so what's going on here is this is pretty much the opposite, so it's lighter where it's darker, probably because this color ramp is flipped, and that's where the confusion with my setup is. This doesn't need to be that dark. Let's leave some of the values that light, I guess, in this case, and then Let's make this a little flatter. Bring that up. It's kind of reminds me of flan. Not far off. And then just, I feel like, yeah, just a little, the more range in values while still hitting all the right points is important. Yeah, so let's try to look back at this. So if there's a point I wanted to hit, it would be that inner crevice. I think I guess we're getting that, right? Kind of doing the opposite. So let's try flipping these. This is going to involve a lot of cleanup. So if I flip color ramp, multiply, let's change that something smoother. It would be swine. And then just lighten that up. Let's adjust these. Let's try flipping again. Bring these down. Yeah, so we want the outer edge to be light and the crevices to be darker. So it's never going to reach black, probably, but sort of approach that, just because the way B-spline's gradient behaves. So with that, so this is looking pretty bright. I think we can smooth that out, just adjusting these. Look at this. Just that. And let's adjust this noise texture. Just need that much variation, just enough to. And then this noise within noise is what the detail and roughness are. Cool, happy with that. So it's a good color. That's a big part of selling it. So let's look at the lights. Let's bring that up quite a bit. So right now it's just looking like a kid's toy, what you find in like one of those fake plastic kitchens. And yeah, so let's focus on this material. So I'm gonna add a bump. I think that really high frequency noise, small detail right here, is gonna be helpful for creating that bread texture. It's a bit much right here, but we can smooth it out with distance. And I like to do that before strength because smoothing it out also affects the strength. And then turn down. It's definitely too smooth, so we turn up the roughness just a little bit. I think some reflectivity is nice. Yeah, and then so living things and fruits and food a big part of what makes them appetizing is the subsurface scattering, because it's the impression there's color from within. So I think that's good reason to be like, oh yeah, this will be good. I think red most of the time is white. So even though this is a radius, which is like a length, this affects the color. So to create white, you want to make those even. Yeah, so it affects the color, but in addition to the width that it blurs for subsurface. And yeah, so maybe we could have it more on the yellow side, because that's kind of the color of the crust. It's going to be, if anything, like very pale yellow. So notice those particles while it's processing are yellowish. If we zoom out, maybe we can see a little better. So, and then sorry, one thing I forgot to do is plug that into subsurface color. So the color difference is going to be the all in the radius. So if we bring this really close, go into material preview, you won't be able to see that. It's currently compiling if we look down here. And then we can see, maybe more quickly, effects of the subsurface scattering. There's no lights, so we need to activate that, because it's just a material preview. But it's the same effect as if it were an EV, which is a close approximation of what it would look like in cycles. So if we look at that light, it's like green. It's probably next to this. Yeah, so if I adjust that, the color's changing. Let's try just one for each of them. And then if we bring it up, if anywhere we're going to see it on the edge slightly, right there. So there's warmth in this. I'm buying it. So that, call that. And I think I'm gonna want some softness to. Sorry, just thinking out loud. Let's just. I don't like that line there, so I'm going to fix that. If we use this again. And then flip this, so look at this area, I don't want that fade, so ease to smooth it out, and then just gonna make that the factor, and make these, yeah, it's pretty good. losing the gradient there. So let's bring it back to the bottom. Let's add an HDRI for more natural lighting. So kind of just add an environment texture. Oh. That's fine. Add an environment texture. Open my downloads. So in a sec we'll see. And then plane, put that, reset the position, scale it. So now we can see it in a more natural light. And maybe we can add some, can use the roughness to sort of add some wobble to it, because it shouldn't be this this smooth around. So I'm just gonna put that into the displacement. So other mix, RGB, and then linear light. Bring the noise in there and turn that way down. We'll sample that so I can see a little better. So there we're getting that wobble, so that's good. And turn down detail. Let's turn it down a little. And let's just set it to the top of it again. So we'll mask this out from the top just like we did before. We'll use a color ramp. So again with this, okay. So if we look at this, we want the top to be the only part that's affected. Change that to ease. It's probably a dark enough gradient for that. And turn this down. Yeah, so that's it. I think I'm gonna show you how to just add some sauce. What do you call it? Sauce, icing, yeah. To the top. Let's just make sure all this is organized. So just gonna call this the color. That's how we create the color right here. And then make this part of that. And these are all setups for the displacement. So as you can see, I'm using all these mix RGB nodes, which do different things, and you'll get a better feel for how they work by doing it yourself, even more than watching me do it. So if you want, you can just follow along with how I do these things. Yeah. So we have this, and then we can use a mix shader to add some icing on top. So right here, these ones don't have icing, but I've seen somewhere they like drizzle it across. So I'm just gonna start from the beginning and create a mask. You can use a wave texture to create the lines across the icing. And you can use another wave texture to distort it. This is going to go a different direction from that. And then, so with linear light, it's my main go-to for distortion. And I'll turn that down. We'll store it again with some noise, which actually we can just do by adding some distortion on this wave texture. I think I do want to add like some variations in the direction, so I can use a Musgrave texture. So sorry if my mouse shortcuts are difficult to see right now. Can I hide this so it's easier? Yeah, and so add that. Yeah, I think I do want it to be kind of random, not like a totally clean thing. Turn down, just kind of play with these, and then notice this is stretching right here, so instead I'm going to use that position instead, just like I did earlier with the roughness on the bun. So there's a lot of distortion there. I don't need that much. Let's try turning it up and then add a larger scale to create that variation we want. And then interesting. So it needs detail in order to store it. So fun. So that's what the vector looks like. Those are the coordinates. They're just processed as colors. Shown there is, and we can turn down that detail. Let's keep it a little smooth, you know. Another color ramp, and let's just make really tight. Maybe we'll see if how that looks in comparison. I'm liking that. Yeah. So we can now use create a principled shader. We're also going to add this to the height of this, so it takes that into respect. Plug this into there, and as you can see, it's pretty dramatic. Just bring that down. It's kind of hard to see, so let's use just that height information. So okay, yeah, that's pretty good. So let's adjust that. if I could make it a little wider. Let's make the frosting. We don't need this in the base color, we're just gonna mask it out anyway. So this will be all white. I'm gonna go into material preview. This will just be quicker to get a feel for what I want this to look like. I'm using Voronoi texture to create some specularity. So there's like gonna be high frequency specks of reflection. And are gonna be different in value. Let's see. Yeah, so if so this is in the output. It's not. Oh, and the bump here is just from the displacement. So even though there's nothing in the bump node, it's just showing that because displacement doesn't work in EV. And yeah, right now, so the color is just like random color IDs. If we look at the color output, color ramp, we can control that. So dark is going to be totally shiny. The white will be not shiny. So this doesn't need to be totally like that. It's going to be more on the shiny side. And then, so if we look at this, you can sort of see the random reflection. Yep. And then a slight subsurface for this as well. A little more on the yellow side, so RG. And to make yellow, you need some red and green. So RGB. It seems like there's a lot of yellow at first, and that kind of calms down as it renders out. But you can see the subsurface right here on the edges. And yeah, so that's pretty close to how I want it. Now we can use this, except I want it to be no gradient. So there. So it's a sharp line between the two different materials. I might want some of it showing through because this is partially transparent. Like we want the frosting to sort of shine through in some places, so might not make that totally white. Displacement's only going upwards, so like it doesn't really show so much on the sides. I think I'm going to resolve that by just combining this by the height again, masking that out. So if I have the height right here, my color ramp, I can just remove the height. So make sure that's turned up. And then let's use ease, so it's a smooth transition. And it appears there's a seam there, and that's because of the texture coordinates are using UV. Can try position, probably have to rescale some things. That's okay. That's fine. This looks really yellow, but that's just early stage in the render. So notice it becomes more white. This is kind of doubling down, but we could add bump right here, adjust how much this part. So need a bump node right there for height. So for now our bump node looks like that. We can smooth that out, that sharp line, distance. And then we still have the material of the bun on the ground, so we're going to use another mix shader. And again with the height, yeah, just plug that into the factor. Just gonna have a white diffuse on the ground so we can tell the difference. Or Shift S to swap nodes. Let's just do transparent. So shader F, shader transparent. So if we click on this and then change this to less than, hide this. Can now see the results. There's going to be this square here. That's just a shadow because those two objects are occupying the same space. And that's okay. I think the final thing I'm going to do is just adjust this distortion and the width of it. So here. So there you have it. I hope you found this informative or inspiring, and that you go try some creating stuff with some nodes for yourself. So thanks for watching. Yeah, have a great day.